welcome to the Students of Storrs podcast, a brand new podcast hosted by UCTV with collaboration from the Daily Campus. We are just that, Students of Storrs, and while we are away for the remainder of this semester and the foreseeable future, we wanted to bring you content through a new medium. I'm Noam Watt, I'm your host. Today I'm joined by Jake Ferrari of UCTV. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you, sir.
And Kevin Arnold of the Daily Campus. How's it going, Kev?
What's going on? Happy to be here.
You guys staying sane? Some crazy times out there right now.
Doing what we can. Missing baseball a little extra today on what was supposed to be opening day.
Like I said, we are students of Storrs. I'm a sophomore. These two guys are seniors. We're going to be rotating in different voices on each episode. Today, we're just going to start with the basics, sort of process what's going on in the world right now, do a little bit of season recap and highlights for the winter sports, and then we'll finish with our favorite moment from the winter sports season. Our next podcast will be later this week or early next week. These two guys will join me yet again, and we'll discuss UConn men's basketball. Now, on this podcast, we are sticking exclusively UConn sports. We'll have some life mixed in there as well, have some reality checks, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So without any further ado, guys, give me your reactions to sort of what's going on in the sports world right now or what's not going on in the sports world. And we'll start with you, Jake.
Yeah, so it's just crazy. And it all came so fast. It was just I was actually in the studio. It was a Tuesday or a Wednesday night when the Rudy Gobert thing happened, and then all of a sudden everything just started getting canceled. NBA was first, and then the tournament said no fans, and they just canceled it altogether, and then everything fell apart within 48 hours. So, you don't really realize, how much sports means to you until you don't have any of it. And that's where we're at right now. There's nothing to watch. I'm forced to be watching sitcoms. I'm not used to that. So, it's tough, but it's a good opportunity to, kind of look back, reflect, on the past seasons. I've been watching a lot of UConn stuff on UConnHuskyGames.com. That is a godsend right now, that website. So been spending a lot of time on that, and now that spring break's over, getting back into the schoolwork aspect of it. But definitely a huge empty space without sports right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It was 2 weeks and 1 day ago that shut down. So it feels like years ago.
Yeah,
honestly.
No, I think the worst part of it was when I was with you, Noam. We were at men's basketball media availability right before the AAC tournament was supposed to start. And we all got the email saying that our trip was canceled due to the university standards. And that's when it was just like, okay, wow, this is a serious thing. Everything's getting shut down. Then the tournament got shut down. And I don't know, it hasn't been fun. I'll say that much. It has not been a fun time, but I don't know. You gotta get used to it. And
personally, I think the worst part is that I feel like this came at the worst possible time for sports. The tournament's coming up, all the conference tournaments are coming up. The only conference tournaments that got played were all the low major schools, nothing real special, like the Big Sky or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Just no closure for the basketball season. It seemed like especially the men's team was about to maybe go on a run, at least give us some good hope for next year, probably play in the postseason. And then NBA playoffs coming up, NHL playoffs, baseball opening day. You got the Masters if you care about golf. It's just March and April is such a good time for sports, and we are missing out on that. And whether these things are going to be replayed or what's going to happen is yet to be seen.
Yeah, Kevin, I remember we were sitting in the dining room in Worth. I had just checked flight to Fort Worth. I think you had checked in too, or were about to or something, and it was just surreal. And then it's like a cascade. It's like every day there was something new. And now the reality is there's nothing. And Jake, like you said, this time of spring, so many exciting events going on, the dawning of a new season, you get nice weather, and now it's just sort of, we're sitting at home doing nothing. So it's a brutal reality, but you know what? That's life. We gotta do what we can to flatten the curve, as they say, and try and beat this thing so we can get back to what life should be sooner than later. So let's get into some nitty-gritty sports, starting with the winter season. Give me a quick season recap of just men's and women's hockey, and then we'll move into the basketball teams after that. Obviously, women's hockey, a run to the Hockey East finals, didn't end up as they wanted, as they fell to Northeastern, but still a good season there. And then the men also had a really strong, especially close to the season. Either one of you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, admittedly, I did not pay as much attention to the hockey teams as I should have, but with the men, from what I was seeing on social media, that it seemed like the typical men's hockey season where they got off to like a weak start, losing to some lesser opponents at home, and then gained strength as the season went on. Obviously, they're in the best hockey conference in America, and had some memorable home wins towards the end of the season. They beat BU. Like, they seem to do that every year. They just beat a ranked BU team at home, in some comeback fashion. And then obviously the UMass game. Personally, my first UConn hockey game I went to as a senior was the final one of the season. But I mean, it was memorable. They scored twice within the last 2 minutes to beat the number 8 team in the country, UMass. So it seemed like I mean, they didn't get the home ice advantage like they wanted to. That they were going up to Maine, were they going up to UMass or Maine?
They were about to
They're
go to
going to go
Maine.
up to Maine.
Maine,
Yeah.
right? So they were going up to Maine to play that series, unfortunately. But it seemed like they had some momentum. I don't know if they've ever won a playoff game in Hockey East, and they were the 5 seed, so it seemed like they had a chance to do that this year. But
Yeah, and they had a good record.
Yeah,
They had a good regular season record against Maine too. They took one at Maine. It was Maine's first home loss of the season. So Coach Kavanaugh's squad definitely made a push. Disappointing, especially for the seniors. I mean, the younger guys, Ruslan Isakov and Vladislav Firstov, they got more time, and the team's going to do a lot of damage in the next couple of years.
Oh yeah, those guys are some specials players.
Yeah,
and Ruslan's so small, but they're a special group for sure. They'll have some success in the years up ahead, but it was a tough way to end this year.
Yeah, and then I'd say for the women that it seemed like they got off to a hot start. They had a lot of wins at the beginning of the season, and then didn't hear too much about them, as January rolled on. But then they made that run in the tournament. Pretty surprisingly, they made it all the way to the championship game where they got smacked around pretty good, but nothing to feel bad about for them. They surpassed people's expectations certainly this season.
Yeah, they had a big, first round of that Hockey East playoffs. They went up to BC, which can be a tough place to play. Nice, gorgeous arena, Conte Forum up there, Chestnut Hill, but lost game 1, came back and won 2 straight, and vaulted them into the semis of the Hockey East, and then won there. Yeah, it didn't end up as they wanted, but at least for the women's hockey team, they had closure to their season. It ended as a hockey season should have ended, with a loss. Obviously, they don't want to lose, but it's better than it being canceled, which is what happened to many other tournaments.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, they hovered around 500 for most of the season, and then to go on a Cinderella-esque run like that in a tough conference, that's nothing to hang their heads on. That's an impressive feat for sure.
Now, switching to the hardwood for men's and women's basketball, it was really one of the more interesting seasons for UConn in general. Not just the men or the women, but together. The women, they came in with sort of mixed expectations, lost 3 games. I know, 3 games, shocker. Fire Gino, get him out of there, waste some money. But then, end of the season, they were on a huge win streak. They rolled through the AAC again, 139-0. We've all seen that. They never lost a game in that conference. Looked like the postseason, there was going to be maybe a little special run for Crystal Dangerfield as a senior with her team. Then, tournament canceled. Megan Walker decides to forego her senior season, go to the WNBA. What do you guys think about the women's team right now?
I mean, it was a mixed season, as you said. They had those tough losses, games they typically would have won, especially at home at Gamble. They had that big loss to Oregon. But Gino said at the end of the season that the mood around the locker room and practicing was that they had sort of figured out their issues and that they were poised to make a run. And you figure they would at least get to the Elite Eight, play the number 1 seed in their region, and you always have a chance, especially if you're UConn. Like, no matter what the talent is, there's always the legacy hanging over UConn women's basketball and facing Gino Auriemma in a tournament game. And so they might have faced a school that didn't have the experience, 3 Final Fours that Crystal Dangerfield has, Megan Walker has, to an extent. So it's, again, this the lack of closure, especially for those two who end their UConn careers, with the American title, but that doesn't really mean too much. Granted, it's hard, but come on.
Anybody can do that.
Exactly, yeah, anybody, come on. But lack of closure. But I mean, things are looking up for next year. Obviously, they got that great recruiting class coming in, and it seems like they're going to be back in the national. I mean, they're in the national picture always, but back up top next year.
Yeah, your heart kind of aches a bit for Kyla Irwin in this whole situation too. I mean, she was kind of a role player, not getting a ton of minutes most of her career, and then she burst onto the scene as a starter this year on a team that kind of lacked a bit of depth for the most part. But then to go out with a brutal injury like that, and then to not get that closure, like you were saying, of going on an NCAA run and possibly a national championship run, who knows what they were going to do. It's just a tough situation. Like, the whole situation obviously is tough, but I think the sky's the limit, obvious, for almost any Gino Auriemma team. But next year you got Paige Bookers coming in, and I don't know, they'll be exciting for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting too because the last, I don't know, handful of years they'd played in their Sweet 16 Elite Eight in either Albany or Bridgeport, so it was a huge home court advantage. This year it looked like they were going to go out to Portland, probably face Oregon in that Elite Eight matchup. It would have been a really great for the sport of women's college basketball. It would have had a huge audience for that game. But B, it would have been cool to see a Gino Auriemma team on the road as an underdog in the tournament, which is not something we've seen for a while. But next year, Paige Becker's coming, number 1 recruit in the country, Gatorade National Player of the Year, Slam Magazine cover. Plus, people are sleeping on the fact that Avina Westbrook, transferred from Tennessee, is going to be back next year. Now, we're going to transition to the men's team. Guys, best season for the men in, 4 years, 5 years, since maybe 2016, 17? Arguably even more exciting than then.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it was. I had the honor and pleasure of being around that team all year, and it was something. Like, when we got invited down to that first open practice, their mindset was set on that AAC title. They had that picture following around them all season, from meetings to team meals, flights, wherever they were. That photo of the trophy was there. CV and Al were determined to try to reach that next 1-2 UConn guard combo level, like legendary. They didn't really get there, but they had those high hopes, and to see it not all the way through it's heartbreaking to an extent, and it's disappointing more so. They had a real good chance, I think, of making a good conference tournament run. They beat all the top teams in the conference. The Houston on senior night was huge. There was a ton of confidence in that locker room, especially when Bouknight sort of elevated his game to those double-digit performances and the dunks and everything. You could see there's a lot of life in the program again.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking back to that 2016-2017 season, that was Kevin and my freshman year. And we both grew up in Connecticut, both big UConn basketball fans. And going to that season, we were ranked 18th in the country preseason. 3 years removed from a national championship. We had the top 5 recruiting class, and they called themselves the top 5. It was Noel Tariq was the prize of the class. They had Jawan Durham, who would later transfer to Notre Dame. They had Vance Jackson, who later transferred to New Mexico. And they had Mamadou, whose knees blew out, basically, and he was forced to coach. And then, the guy who was kind of the afterthought, Christian Vital, 3-star recruit. I remember it was down between UConn and UNLV to where he was going to go. Chose UConn. Thank God for that. because he was one of the few bright spots over our 4 years here. But yeah, just thinking back to that season, all the expectations, and then you just get slapped in the face with that Wagner loss. And after that game, you're like, all right, I mean, teams lose to small schools occasionally. Like, this isn't that big of a deal. But then they lost to Northeastern the next game, again at home, and that's when you started to realize that maybe there was a bigger problem here. So we witnessed the lowest of lows, but then it was really cool to see the rise of the program. Dan Hurley, guy with a lot of passion. Again, memories of Jim Calhoun, who's obviously, I think is the greatest college basketball coach of all time, but obviously I'm a little biased there. But
Just a little.
But so yeah, Calhoun, the memories of him in Dan Hurley, the passion, and then they beat Syracuse at the Garden, and I was there, and it was one of the best memories from college for me. Hit the snag last year, AAC play kind of, but they were more competitive. And then this year, of course, again, big win at home against Florida. Looked a little wonky at the beginning of AAC play, but they grew so strong. And you end on a good note. You end feeling like there is so much hope going back to the Big East for this team. And I'm just excited that I got to witness a season like this in my time at UConn.
Yeah, and they absolutely got the right man at the helm of the ship. Dan Hurley, the carpenter. I mean, year one.
We got to get Rothstein on.
Yeah, we do got to get Rothstein podcast. Year one, a big jump. Year two, quite arguably an exponential jump. Not so much in the record. 19 and 12, 10 and 8 in the American is respectable. But you look at the metrics. KenPom, they finished, 52? They were top 60 net ranking. They improved drastically defensively. Offensively, towards the end of the season, they were a team with playmaker, one of them, Christian Vital, arguably. But they had a number of guys who could facilitate the offense, whether it was Vital, Gaffney, or Bouknight. They had terrific, versatility, playing Whaley at the 5 with 4 guards. This was a really exciting team to watch on the offensive end. A number of spectacular highlight reel plays. Obviously, Bouknight had his dunk after dunk. It seemed like there was a top 10 dunk every game from him. But it's going to be a long time, a long wait until November when season 3 under Coach Hurley tips off. And boy, I cannot wait for that. So what do you mean, hopefully?
Well, who knows what this Corona thing's going to do, if it's going to come back and there's no sports for another year. Oh, my God.
That would be the worst case scenario right there.
That is worst case scenario.
That would be, as John Rothstein says, the epitome of brutality. So we're going to close today's premiere episode, our first one, with your favorite moment from the winter sports season. This can be hockey, basketball, or life in general.
I think I'm going to have to jump back to that senior night game for the men's team against Houston. There was a whole lot of hype around that, obviously, with the number 21 team in the country coming into town, an AAC rival, someone they had previously lost to this season. They had got blown out in the AAC tournament a year prior. And CV's last game at home, Altarique's last game, who knows what Altarique's doing next year. And I remember sitting there pregame, and this is when obviously Christian's jumping up the all-time scoring leaderboard, and I'm looking, and he's 26 points away from passing Jalen Adams, someone who he calls a brother. So I remember I tweeted before the game, I was like, CV's 26 points away from passing Jalen Adams on the all-time scoring list against the number 21 team in the country on senior night would be one hell of a way to do it. And I didn't think he was going to do it after the first half. They were playing a very solid team game. Obviously, they fighting and everything. And then I didn't think he got it at first. And before he goes before he takes center court and addresses the crowd with that snipe out speech and everything, that was really cool. But I get the box score, and I see he dropped 26. I was like, wow, he actually did it. And it's like kind of a small thing in the grand scheme of things. It's like, okay, yeah, the team and changing the culture and everything was the big thing for this season under Hurley. But to see CV do that to pass somebody who was a mentor to him, somebody who had that close of a relationship, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with men's basketball. I'm gonna go back to the Memphis game. Big weekend game at the XL Center, huge crowd, sold out crowd. Everyone's hyped. There's so much excitement, and then bam, a Cook tears his Achilles, which is obviously terrible. And it was 2 minutes into the game, 3 minutes in, and it already felt like a loss. Yeah,
yeah. I think it was like 59 seconds in.
Yeah, it was like exactly 59.
Just brutal.
You could tell the place was deflated. The team was down. Hurley was crying. There was guys crying on the bench. Just a tough situation. And, they're playing a good team, too. The best player in the league, guy that got away, Precious Achua. And they rallied like they always did and, took a lead. And it wasn't like they won. They won, but it felt comfortable. It wasn't like Cincinnati that was just excruciating, tear your hair out, or like Florida earlier in the season where it looked like they were going to blow it. They were up 6 with a minute to go. They just had to make free throws, and they were a pretty good free throw shooting team. Obviously, you had the Book Knight, the Vital steal, and then the Book Knight dunk on Precious, and the place just lit up. I think that was the loudest I've ever heard the XL Center. It was just an awesome atmosphere the entire game, and that was a game that I feel like I was like, okay, UConn basketball is back because we got a solid win, comfortable win at home against a good team.
That Book Night dunk was insane. I mean, first of all, the CV steal was crazy, and we're going to talk more men's basketball on our next episode, but that game, I feel like when Book Night threw that dunk down, the place, literally the roof came off. I mean, I remember replaying that clip probably 50 times, and you see a Cook in the walking boot on the bench, just fists in the air, basically jumping with a torn Achilles. And, oh, man, there were so many memories from men's basketball season, and we'll get into those next episode. But for me, my favorite moment was way back in November, and no, it wasn't the Florida game. That was insane. I feel like I lost my voice, my mind thing. But it was a Thursday night Buffalo game in Charleston. Huskies had just won. They played a really solid game. James Bouknight, first game, after his 3-game suspension. And then the press conference, and Hurley's talking, we fought hard. I'm proud of our team, showed grit, toughness, intensity. And then all of a sudden, bang, 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 bang. We look to our left, and there's just like 5 knuckleheads banging on the windows. And then one guy breaks out into the big red UConn chant. And Hurley just loses it at the mic. He starts cracking up. He's like, man, everything they tell me about this job, man, it's true. And at that point, I just had this feeling inside myself that I was like, wow, I am at UConn. I'm down in Charleston, so fortunate to be able to go there to cover this tournament. And this team is back on the map. And yeah, it was game 4 of the season, or even game 4 of the season. Next game, they ended up losing to Xavier in double overtime. But that moment will stick with me forever.
That was a classic clip right there.
Yeah, that was so funny.
It just shows how crazy people from Connecticut are, because very few schools travel, especially given the context of how the program is. Travel down to Charleston for an early season tournament, and then banging on the press conference window. So shout out UConn fans for being kind of crazy.
Yeah, Kevin.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of that tournament, that was the they better get us now because we're coming comment. And
no, that was later.
I don't know. They're coming for sure. That was later? I thought it was at the end of the. It wasn't at the end of Charleston?
No.
Oh, it was the Nova game. You're right.
Yeah, it's all good. This season all together. Yeah, I remember staying up real late that Thursday night and posting that Hurley clip, thinking like, oh, this was funny. And then I woke up the next morning, and my phone was just like blowing up. I had like all these comments on Twitter and stuff. People just loved that clip of Hurley. It was so funny. So anyways, a lot of men's basketball talk dominating the tail end of this episode. some highlight moments. Guys, I'm really happy for you that you got to see some good moments to end your UConn careers. Unfortunate that they didn't get a run in the postseason, but they won their last game, so that counts at least. So on our next episode, Kevin and Jake will join me again. We'll talk more Huskies basketball, talk Dan Hurley's program. We'll talk the transfer market. We'll talk, do we think that those on the roster right now are going to be back next season, particularly some guys like Sid Wilson and Josh Carlton. And we will break down everything and anything. We'll even field some questions from you guys if you send them in. Jake, Kevin, any final comments from you?
Just thanks for having us on. I'm excited to do the next one, and hope people enjoyed.
Yeah, this should be a really cool project, and happy we could get a collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, UCTV Daily Campus coming together for this. We'll be together for most episodes. We're going to try and bring some athletes on, maybe even coaches if we're lucky, and possibly some other reporters from the greater Hartford area. Again, we're all at home for the rest of the semester. We'll try and bring you as many episodes of the Students of Storrs podcast as we can. But for now, for Jake and Kevin, I'm Noam. Have a great one. Go Huskies, everybody.